So welcome everybody, and thank you for joining us. My name is Jamie Ackman, and I'm a transportation columnist for San Jose Spotlight, which is the city's first nonprofit independent news organization and winner of the Publisher of the Year award by local independent online news publishers. So congratulations to San Jose Spotlight for such a big impact so quickly. You may know that I've spent most of my career working in public transportation, and I even worked at VTA as a communications manager, but I missed your time at VTA, unfortunately. But I did know as a Bay Area transportation employee that you were bringing a sea change to the way that the Bay Area was going to approach the mission of public transportation. So thank you for joining us today. I'd like to take a couple of minutes to introduce VTA's CEO, Nuria Fernandez. Nuria joined VTA in 2013, but she came to us from beginnings in Panama City, Panama, where she came to understand the importance of access to public transportation. She moved to the United States, where she pursued her civil engineering degree and an MBA. And after that, her career took her all across the country, from Chicago, where she was a commissioner with the Department of Aviation, to the New York Metropolitan Transportation Authority, and all the way to the FTA, where she was appointing acting administrator by President Bill Clinton. Since 2013, Nuria has been overseeing the work to implement BART to Silicon Valley, including the first phase of service launched just this year, and overseeing more than 2,000 employees and all of the ways that VTA plans for, operates, and maintains the county's full complement of mobility needs. So thanks for joining us. If anyone has questions, we'll try to leave a couple minutes at the end, so go ahead and put them in the chat for us. So Nuria, thank you again for joining us. You've supported and mentored your fellow transportation professionals throughout your career, including your work with the Women Transportation Seminars. Women are being hit particularly hard during this pandemic, between job losses, the pressures of working from home, and trying to educate your kids at home. What advice are you giving to your team to help support them during this time? And what do you do to help yourself stay focused when things seem this stressful?
Thank you, Jamie. Before I answer your question, I just wanted to thank Spotlight. This is a great opportunity. I really look to that newsletter every day for my news. And thank you for the opportunity to have this conversation. You know, the pandemic has hit everyone really hard. And I'm glad you mentioned women, but we also have a lot of our employees, our male employees, that have had to take on roles at home because their partner, spouse is not able to stay home with the kids, especially after schools were closed. So we have to be very understanding. We recognize that no one anticipated this pandemic. And we were told initially that it would be short-lived, that there would be vaccines and that it was going to start to subside, the virus would be under control. So we didn't think that it was going to go beyond the first few months. But notwithstanding that fact, one of the things that we did is that we made sure that our employees were well taken care of, that they were fine, that they could make a decision as to whether or not they were able to come to work, and if they could do work from home, then we were able to accommodate that. I updated the VTA's work from home policy so that we could offer that flexibility. I have maybe around 50% of our employees are working from home because they can't, and those that cannot work from home, we're making accommodations to ensure that not everyone is here at the same time. Then, of course, we look to our bus operators, maintenance personnel, supervisors, people who are our front line, our heroes, because they're out there taking the risk and doing the work of moving essential workers, and as essential as we are in providing that service. So since they can't work from home, we have done everything that we can to make sure that they are protected. We've spared no expense in providing them with the PPEs that they need to do their work. But coming back to your question about how to support the employees. So the work from home was one, but two, also being understanding that circumstances do come about. There are individuals who fell within the age group, they have existing conditions, they're vulnerable. So those accommodations had to be made as well. And as I've always told the men and women that I have mentored over the years is, yes, you can do anything, but you don't have to do it all at once. So we do have to pace ourselves. We have to recognize that the environment is causing a lot of stress. It's not just about the pandemic and economic downfall and people losing their jobs, but then we had elections, we had the racial riots and the equity issues. So it's all coming in at once, and it's coming so fast that if we don't stay focused, we're going to get picked up and end up in the Oz.
Yeah.
So clearly it's a challenge.
Absolutely. And speaking of things moving fast, you just shared when we first started the call that the county is moving back to the red status today for the coronavirus pandemic. What does that mean in terms of ridership on VTA buses, and will that change the way you're providing service?
I can only imagine that we're going to see some change. We were hopeful when we graduated from red to orange, because that meant that other segments of the community were going to start to open up, which would bring more service workers and others onto our system. Going back to red, I have to admit, we had to go back, pull out the old list of do's and cans and cannots under the red environment. So we're refreshing on what that means. But notwithstanding that, we are an essential service, and we still need to provide that essential connection to people throughout this county. We had, as you may recall, back in December, we had rolled out a new transit service plan, and we were so excited. That plan was geared towards BART opening, and we had already started seeing January and February about 3% increase in ridership. So that was a positive move in the right direction. And then the pandemic hit. And in those first few weeks in the middle of March, the beginning of April, we saw a drop in ridership, a significant 80%. So it was taking 20% riders. So if you can imagine, back in January, we had about 111,000 passengers a day. And you take 20% of that, so that's 22,000 people. We go from 111 to 22,000 throughout all our existing network. So we adjusted the network, but we continue providing 100% service. That is, we did not eliminate any routes, but we made adjustments on how those routes, how the buses will be servicing those routes. And the bottom line is that from that 80% in drop, we are now at about 66% from the pre-COVID. And today we're at 74%. So we've seen some increase in not only the level of service that we're providing, but the ridership. There's a nominal increase of about maybe 2%, 1.5% in ridership increase. So what we are proposing is to take us from this 74% where we are today to 80%. That's one of the options that were on the scenarios that we took to the community and we initially presented to the board, and we're making recommendations. But today's announcement is going to require us to go back and think through what that really means, because the only reason, one of the main reasons that we're able to continue providing service is because of the emergency funding we received through COVID. Without that funding, we would have been hemorrhaging about $18 million a month. So over 10 months, 180 million, and we have a budget that we had approved for fiscal year 21 of 500 million. We're nowhere near that. We're in the 300 million in terms of the funding, because we got hurt with the sales tax. People weren't shopping, things were closed. And then of course, a drop in ridership. Ridership and fare is only 10% of our budget. So the bulk of our budget is really sales tax. And when people aren't shopping and stores were closed and restaurants were limited, that had a significant impact as well. But the COVID emergency funds were not intended to be long-term. It was a one and done, and we're still hopeful that there will be another influx of funds, but there's no guarantee. So unlike my colleagues in the region, where some of them are going to be hitting that cliff in the next month, by the end of this year, and others by spring and fall and summer, we believe that we can continue providing service. We just have to figure out now with this red and what that means, what level, if we stay where we are, or if we go towards that 80%. We increase from 74 to 80%, which is what was our initial intent. And that's what we have been bringing to our advisory committees.
So let's talk a little bit about the 2021 transit service planning process. It has been a little bit of a journey for VTA because of the pandemic. I know that you are working on your final December proposal that will go before the board at the next meeting, and you hope to have a final recommendation about the service changes for next year, providing, of course, that the pandemic doesn't change all of that before February, right? That's when the next changes would take effect.
Yes,
Yeah.
you're correct. And, as I just stated, uh, it was our expectation to take us from 74% where we are today and increase that to 80%. We'll do some evaluation and we'll determine, since the red designation is effective on Tuesday, it's going to take a little while to see what, if any, significant impact that has on our current 74% ridership.
Right.
As of right now, we're still looking at an 80% increase in the level of service.
If we were to go back to a statewide or nationwide lockdown, as has been discussed by certain incoming members of the Biden administration, would there be, how significant would that financial hit be for VTA? And would you have to have some sort of relief funding in order to fill that gap? Do you have any thoughts about that yet?
Uh, some early thoughts that I'll share. I think a lockdown will be um, a major impact on public transportation because we are in the people moving business, and where there's no people, there's no business, right? So clearly, that would be something that would need to be considered because it would be quite devastating. We'll continue moving essential workers, but then the cost of moving one person does not change. Whether we have a full bus or an empty bus, there's still a cost, and that cost needs to be addressed through our budget. And if the funding isn't there to replenish that budget, to close that deficit gap, then decisions would need to be made. And remember, we're not operating in a vacuum here. We're part of a network. So our network is connected to Caltrain, to Santa Cruz, to Monterey, and then AC Transit and BART. And that takes us further up north to a broader segment of this region. So as the decisions affect one, it affects us all.
Right. And speaking of proposals that would keep people home, the Metropolitan Transportation Commission, of which of course VTA is a member, had proposed a rather controversial greenhouse gas emissions reduction policy earlier this year, one that got quite a bit of attention around the proposal to move to a sizable portion of the population working from home on a permanent basis. I believe that was about 60% telecommute was the bar that they were hoping companies would hit. And I know VTA, like a lot of other Bay Area transit agencies, responded with concern to that proposal. Can you talk a little bit about why that would obviously be such an impact for Bay Area transit, and what are ways that transit agencies are suggesting as alternatives we help meet those greenhouse gas reduction guidelines?
Yeah, let me just start out by saying that one of the missions of public transportation is to move large number of people so that we can in fact protect that very fragile environment that we all live in. So clearly anything that improves the environment is good. However, I just want to be clear because it is a proposal that was brought by MTC executives to the MTC commissioners. Our board of directors have never taken a position on that proposal. No, I will say that from a transit perspective, reducing the number of people riding public transit is counterproductive, as I mentioned before. We're in the people moving business, so we need people to continue in that business. From an environmental perspective, reducing the number of persons traveling is good. However, when you increase the number of individuals and give them opportunities to work from home or require them to work from home to meet a target, what that does, it could have some unintended consequences, including urban sprawl. Because if I could live anywhere and work from home, that's great. But certainly I won't be living where it's expensive and I can't afford. I'll be looking for a location where it's accessible and affordable. And that means that I'll be further out away. So that means that results in investment in infrastructure and other things to bring utilities to these ex-urban localities where it's an option. You get fresh air and you have a lot of space to move around. And that's really, and then what happens to cities? It starts to kill that vibrancy that cities need. You need people in cities to keep it not only economically solvent, but also vibrant. So there's all of those issues that I haven't really heard how they're being addressed. I know that there is an outcome that is designed and they're proposing a way to get to that outcome. But I'm not certain that there has been a full discussion on what the implications of that could be.
Right. I think that they've backed away from that, from what I understand, but it was because of all of the issues that you raised and the impacts that it would have on quality of life in the Bay Area. So you mentioned that you're part of a network that, you like any transit service, rely on your partner agencies to make those connections for your passengers. And of course, recently, as a part of the Caltrain system, VTA was part of the successful passage of the Yes on Measure RR. So that's been a really important milestone for Caltrain in finally achieving a dedicated source of funding for the agency. What comes next long term, now that hopefully the financial question for Caltrain has been addressed, as we start to think about future growth, how the system continues to respond to the changes going on with BART to Silicon Valley, and of course, eventually the Diridon area transit plan?
Yeah, well, we're all still celebrating the passage of RR. I mean, I am ecstatic. I am happy for my colleagues at Caltrain. And of course, we are part of that JPB, the Joint Powers Board, together with San Francisco. So without a doubt, getting a 2/3 vote across 3 counties during a pandemic not only was not easy, but what a tremendous outcome. So coming back to your question about what's next, as many of your readers know, that Caltrain had adopted a business plan. It was very ambitious, and we were all excited about the direction that it was going to take us, because we knew at the time that there's going to be a tremendous growth in this region, and that Caltrain as a spine connecting from Gilroy all the way to San Francisco was going to help with that resurgence, that economic development. But then the pandemic happened, and it brought to light that in corporations that didn't think they had options found out very quickly that they did have options. So it's a matter now of trying to figure out how we can better serve those who need our services, and but yet not fall victim to well, this is what's happening now, so let's not invest. I think it's important that infrastructure investment continues, because infrastructure is here for centuries. It's not something that we're putting in that we're going to remove in a few years. It's going to be here for a very long time. And so much can change, as we have seen. Just look at the Brooklyn Bridge for once. If that had not happened, we will still be ferrying people back and forth. So we have to think with a vision. And that's one of the things that as a region, we've done pretty well around that vision. And in Caltrain, again, being that connection to 3 counties, and with the bookends, both in San Jose and San Francisco, I think that there's a lot of potential. Now, it's going to take a while to rebuild that ridership. But the one thing that's positive is now that Caltrain will have a reliable source of funds that is going to be consistent, and they can plan and budget accordingly. They no longer have to go hat in hand and hope for the best.
Yeah. I had the opportunity to talk with your Jim Lawson, the Chief of External Affairs for VTA, the other day for my column in San Jose Spotlight, and we were engaged in the fun task of imagining what infrastructure would be like under a Biden administration. So I'm glad to see that we will get to find out what infrastructure will be like under a Biden administration. But one of the things he's talked about is a passion for rail, and an interest in investing in particularly in the nation's high-speed rail network. What do you think that could mean for VTA and for Santa Clara County transit users?
Infrastructure is always welcome. It's needed. It's the way that we connect. I think under a Biden administration and with the infrastructure proposals and some of the ideas that started to come out, it's clear that there's going to be a tremendous opportunity for rail and particularly high-speed rail. Can you just imagine? Many of us have traveled around the world and we celebrate what's happening in other countries, and we talk and we boast about taking the high-speed rail in these different, from city to city in Europe and Asia. And then we come back here and we oppose high-speed rail. So I think it is time. It is time for this great nation to have a rail system that is fast, is safe, and that can bring us these connections so that we can in fact, preserve the environment with less pollution than the air travel does, and give us a mode of transportation, another option that is convenient and comfortable. I am really looking forward to the high-speed rail being completed in California and connected to the rest of the United States.
Oh, here, here. I don't like flying, so I can't wait to be able to take a train to LA. Okay, I just have one more question of mine before we turn to some of the questions I've seen coming in here in the chat box. And this one actually came from one of San Jose Spotlight's readers. Earlier this week, San Jose Spotlight asked if anybody had any questions for you. And this comes from Rob in Milpitas. He'd like to know why VTA hasn't pursued personal rapid transit yet, and what costs, I'm sorry, let me rephrase this. Why hasn't VTA pursued personal rapid transit? And I think that he's making a statement here that he believes it's far less than light rail or BART costs and could have better service and higher ridership. So do you have any thoughts around personal rapid transit?
When I was working in Chicago many years ago, this was back in the 80s, there was discussion about personal rapid transit to connect a casino outside of the airport to the airport. And fast forward 40 years and it hasn't happened. But nonetheless, I really appreciate the question that Rob Means. He's been an advocate for electrification of transportation for decades, and he was one of the individuals that came to me when I first started working here with his proposal for personal rapid transit. We are invested as an organization. We have invested in our light rail system, in our BART connection, and that's the direction that we have taken. Because we're in the business of moving more people with less vehicles, when we look at personal rapid transit as a way for mass transit, I'm not sure that is the right application, but that's just Nuria speaking. I think a personal rapid transit may have more utility at airports or other places where you are in a closed environment. More so than where you have a network over 200 square miles of mobility. I think it's just very difficult to do. Personally, I think that there's always room for all kinds of technologies that reduce. I'm an innovation evangelist. I believe that we should be looking at innovation and opportunities. But as we explore the autonomous space, I would like to see that exploration within a public transit system in a current technology, more so than introducing a new technology.
Thank you for answering Rob's question. I'm sure he appreciates that. I don't know much about personal rapid transit, so that was a good little education for me as well. I appreciate it. We have had a few questions coming in from the audience, so I just wanted to go through a couple of the things that have come up here. Let's see. Here's a couple of questions around VTA's relationship with MTC. One reader asks, is VTA considering participating in MTC's Clipper Start program?
The Clipper Start program is that's a great program that's a new name. It used to have a different name before. We were referring to it as the Means-Based Fare program. And it started out as a pilot that BART was going to move forward with MTC because BART did not have a reduced fare for their riders. Other transit systems was followed by Muni, then Caltrain, then Golden Gate, and I believe now it has expanded. One of the things that our residents may not be aware of is that we currently have two programs where we provide subsidized fares. And both of those programs collectively, the cost of them is more than what we would be getting from MTC through a Clipper Start. What I've asked MTC to do is to include our existing programs, since we're the only ones in this region that have these subsidized programs, to include those programs as part of Clipper Start. And that will facilitate the administration, because one of our programs uses tokens and the other one uses the pass, not quite Clipper. So they're still waiting. They have not gotten back to me, but that was the request, that we be part of the program, but not having to invest more, since we already have our own program that we're investing quite a bit in, more so than what MTC would have provided us. And we've asked them, well, give us what you would have given us so we can expand this program and make it part of the whole.
Absolutely. Thank you for answering that. Let's see if we have any other questions from readers. Let's see, Armando asks, VTA operations make up 80% of the company as a whole. I think he's just thanking the employees. He says it's the employees and all the hard workers that make the agency what it is. So.
Absolutely. Thank you, Armando, for thinking of them. They are our heroes and sheroes.
Yes.
At the front lines.
Dave Campbell asks if you could talk a little bit about your priorities for improving bus service and rail service. Obviously, the 2021 service plan isn't exactly what you had hoped it would be, given the impacts of the pandemic. But long term, when ridership comes back, when the economy has been restored post-pandemic, what are VTA's plans?
Yes, so our plans, and we started out about 3 years ago. We rolled out what we call the Next Network, and it was all tied in with BART opening up 2 years ago, and of course that didn't happen. The new transit service plan, the NTSP that we rolled out in December, very promising. That was, if we talk about priorities, that was the priority, was to put the largest emphasis on our frequent corridors, our frequent network. We went from 75% frequency and 25% coverage to 80%. What we want to, we would love to see that continue to grow, because we know where the spines are. We know where those corridors are. We know that they're tied into high activity centers. Our routes are designed so that we can serve hospitals and universities and community centers and all these destinations that people need to get to. And that's the direction that we were moving in. But I don't think we're not going to move away from that. What we're saying with this proposal that we are bringing to the board is, if we were at 111,000 riders per day in January and February, and we're down to 30,000 today, we want to start to increase that, but that has to be tied with in this pandemic, with the opening of the economy. And right now, what we heard today at noon was that we're back to red. That means, if you remember what red was what we were living when the hair salons were closed, barbershops, restaurants had to serve outdoors, and not all of them have sidewalks that they could do that. So if we're going back to red, that is going to have an effect.
Mhm.
But long term, with a vaccine, we're hoping that the full rollout of our new transit service plan, what we started on December 28th, will take us to this new level where we can touch and move people and expand our service. And then, of course, we're going to be looking at some first mile, last mile opportunities, because there are quite a few. Whether we're providing it ourselves or we're partnering with the private sector, I think that there's just so much more that we can do to give people the mobility choice that they need and that they would like.
And you're going to have some opportunities to do that public-private sector partnership with the Google Deered on Station Area Plan. Can you just give us, I know that we're almost at the end of our time, but we've had looks like a question or two about that as well. And can you just give us a little update on what's going on in terms of those discussions?
Yes, so the Google area, the Deered on Area Plan is moving forward. But of course, right now, we just wanted to make sure that we started first with identifying what our operational needs were. Always said that we need to figure out that function goes first and followed by form, because people were excited about a building. We were more excited about how do we interconnect and make sure that people are not walking a mile from one system to the other and can make their, if they're connecting or transferring, they could do that. So now we have established that. We're now taking that information together with what Google has developed as their plan for their development area, and ensuring that in the end, over in the next 10, 15 years, we've got this vibrant, amazing destination that's more than just a destination, but becomes the gateway, because we're talking about an intermodal facility that is going to include bus and rail and private bus operations, as well as other types of mode of transportation that we have yet to imagine or dreamed that would be happening there. As it relates to BART connecting there, we're moving forward with our application for the expedited project delivery, working with the federal government on some of the things that additional information they've asked us to provide as they continue to consider our application for funding. And we're hopeful that we will have a result on this by next year, early next year, or sometimes in the spring. So in essence, the Deered on area is going to be just amazing. And it's going to really expand downtown San Jose in a very positive way.
That's excellent. Well, thank you so much for your time. I know that you're very busy and we need to let you get back to your day, especially with the latest news that you shared with us. So that's going to wrap up our discussion. I want to thank all of our audience for tuning in today. There will be a video recording of today's Q&A available on the San Jose Spotlight website next week. To follow our coverage and to learn how to support our efforts, please visit our website at www.sanjosespotlight.com. Thank you, and we hope to see you again.
And thank you, Jamie. Thanks for this opportunity to spotlight. Have a great weekend and be safe.
You too.